Okay, we're going to talk about Pythagorean Theorem. And when we use the Pythagorean Theorem, it's basically only for right triangles. So it only works for right triangles. And this is a picture of a right triangle. And I've gone ahead and labeled the different parts. We have the side here is called a leg. This other side here is called a leg. And those two legs meet at the 90-degree angle there. And then this long diagonal is called the hypotenuse. And when we label the triangle, the legs are the A and the B, and the hypotenuse is always the C. So just to keep that in mind, okay? So these guys can get mixed up in terms of the A and the B, but this hypotenuse, this diagonal line, always has to remain the C. And basically the theorem says that the sum of the square of this leg and this leg, these two legs, the square of these two legs added together will give you the hypotenuse. And we're going to just kind of explore what that means in a second. But basically we can use the Pythagorean theorem to tell if the lengths represent a right triangle. So if I'm given these sides of a triangle and I'm asked, is this a right triangle or not? Well, if you look and you saw this as a right triangle, sometimes you still have to prove that, right? Because in geometry, you'll be doing some proofs later on. You have to kind of prove this is true sometimes. Well, we're going to go ahead and prove that this is a right triangle. And we know if the Pythagorean theorem works, then this will be called a right triangle. Basically, the theorem looks like this. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That right there is the formula to the Pythagorean theorem. ABC, it's really easy to remember, but you just have to remember all the little squares on there. So what it's saying is this 6 squared plus this 8 squared should equal this 10 squared. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in and see if that's true. The A we said is the 6, so 6, and I'm going to square it, plus B, which is 8 squared equals 10 squared. Now, we're going to see if that's correct or not. Well, 6 squared is 36 plus 64, and because we're just squaring them, right? 6 times 6 is 36, 8 times 8 is 64, 10 times 10 is 100. And we're going to just do a double check. 36 plus 64, if I added those two together, I do get 100. And 100 equals 100. So yes, this is definitely a right triangle. Let's do this again to see if there's another right triangle on this slide. So is this a right triangle? Well, again, we're going to take our formula, 8 squared plus b squared equals c squared. We're going to plug in our sides and see if it makes sense. And if it does make sense and it works out that this side of the equation is equal to this side, well, then we know we have a right triangle because the Pythagorean theorem tells us that, okay? So if a equals 10, it becomes 10 squared, plus if b equals 12, it becomes 12 squared. C equals 16, it becomes 16 squared. Okay, so then if we have that, 10 squared is 100, plus 12 squared is 144, and 16 squared is 256. That's just 16 times 16 is 256. 12 times 12 is 144. That's how I'm getting these. Now if I add these two numbers together, I get 100 plus 144 equals 244. And 244 does not equal 256. So is this a right triangle? Your answer is no, not a right triangle, because these two sides do not equal each other. And if they did, it would be a right triangle according to the Pythagorean theorem, but it doesn't. So it is not. There you go. Okay. Now, what if we are asked to find a side of the triangle? Sometimes, or a lot of times, we'll be using the Pythagorean theorem to find C, or to find one of the missing sides. So if they give you the A and the B and they say find C, all you need to do is plug in what you have. So A is 3, so we're going to do 3 squared plus our b is 4. 4 squared equals c squared. What is 3 squared? It's just 3 times 3, which is 9, plus 4 times 4, which is 16. Okay, so now all we have is, what we're doing here is we're adding these two together, right? So, and that's equal to c squared, right? So what's 9 plus 16? Well, that's equal to 25. And 25 is equal to c squared. I didn't answer what's equal to c. And the way that we do this is basically we're getting the square root of the 25 to answer this. So because this is a c squared, if you do the square root of c squared, will just give you a c, okay? So it's basically canceling out the square by getting the square root of it, okay? And we're gonna get the square root. As you know, if we do it on this side, we have to do it on this side. So then the square root of 25 is 5. So the answer to this is c, that's kind of messy, c equals 5. That is your answer. So this triangle, which is a very good triangle to know, is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, right? This side is 3, this is 4, and this is 5. And a lot of the triangles are based on those sides. You'll see later. So 5 is equal to c. So all you had to do is get the square root, and don't forget that step, because if you leave it as c squared equals 25, you're not done, okay? Let's try another one. Okay, we have a equals 12, b equals 16, find c. Okay, so I know this is my, the c is always the hypotenuse, and I know the formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I know my a is 12 squared plus b is 16 squared equals c squared, which I don't know yet. I do know that 12 squared is 144 plus 16 times 16 is 256, and that is equal to c squared. Well, now what do I have to do? I have to add these two together, and if I go ahead and do my addition on the side, I will get 400. So these two guys together equals 400 equals c squared. And you remember from the last step, the way to get that c all by itself is to go ahead and get the square root of both sides. And so that'll get the c by itself. And the square root of 400 means what times what? The same number times a number times itself will equal 400, right? So the square root of 400 is 20. So this answer is 20. It's 20 equals c. Okay, so let's move on to the last one. What if the side is not c? What if the side is a? Well, if we have the same formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the same exact formula. What is our a? Well, that's what we don't know. A squared, we'll just leave it as that, plus 20 squared equals 25 squared. Okay, so let's see what we can figure out. We have a squared plus 20 squared just means 20 times 20, and 20 times 20 is 400, equals 25 squared, and 25 times 25 is 625. Okay, so now what do we have? We have a one-step equation, don't we? Okay, so we set up our t. Okay, we subtract 400 over here, subtract 400 over here, cancel this out, and get a squared equals, do the subtraction, a squared equals 225. Okay, well, if you're good at multiplication, you should be able to figure out what the a is by getting the square root. So we're going to take the square root of 25, the square root of the a squared is just a equals, and our final answer is 15. Because 15 times 15 equals 225, so that is the missing side, which is a leg, right? The a and the b are both legs. The c is always the hypotenuse. So there you go. Just practice this a lot, because this is a really, really good concept to know and really feel comfortable with. Okay.